They just wheeled my daughter-in-law, Eleanor, into the delivery room. Then she pointed at me. "Get her out. She's a bad influence." My son, Leo, just looked away. I simply nodded, knowing a secret about Eleanor, a truth that could shatter her world. You won't believe what happens next. Like, share, and let us know where you're listening from. The hospital hallway hummed with an anxious energy. But for me, Clara Davies, it was a familiar quiet. I stood just outside the delivery room, my purse clutched tight, listening to the muffled sounds within. Then, the door cracked open. Not Leo, my son, but Eleanor, my daughter-in-law's voice, sharp and clear even through the narrow gap. "Get her out of here. She's a bad influence." My heart constricted. 65 years on this earth, and I was being banished from the birth of my first grandchild by my son's wife. Leo poked his head out, his eyes meeting mine. There was a flicker of apology in them, a quick, helpless shrug, before he quickly retreated, pulling the door shut. He stayed by Eleanor's side, just as he always did. It was a familiar pattern, one I had grown accustomed to over the past 5 years. Leo's weakness, his constant need to appease Eleanor, had become a dull ache in my chest. 5 years. 5 years of Eleanor Hayes's coldness and disrespect. I remembered the day Leo first brought her home. She was stunning, vibrant, with a sharp wit that I initially mistook for confidence. I had tried so hard to welcome her, to make her feel like part of our small, close-knit family. I invited them over for Sunday dinners, offered to help with their apartment, even bought her thoughtful gifts. Every attempt was met with a polite, but unmistakable, chill. Her disdain often manifested in subtle, cutting remarks. "Oh, this food is so traditional, Clara. A bit heavy, wouldn't you say?" she'd comment, pushing my lovingly prepared roast chicken around her plate. Or, "Your house is just so full of things. Not really my style, but I suppose it's cozy." Her words, delivered with a saccharine smile, always managed to chip away at my efforts, leaving me feeling like an unwelcome outsider in my own son's life. It wasn't just a difference in taste, it was a clear message of contempt, delivered piece by piece. Then came the announcement of Eleanor's pregnancy, just a few months ago. I had held a tiny flicker of hope that perhaps a baby, a new life, would soften her, bring us closer. But no, the first thing she said after, "We're expecting," was, "And we're doing things differently, Clara. No old-fashioned nonsense. Everything modern. Everything our way. Every family tradition I gently suggested, every piece of advice I offered, was immediately shot down. The baby shower I envisioned, full of laughter and our family's usual games, was replaced by a chic, minimalist gathering Eleanor organized with her own friends. Nursery decor, baby names, even my offer to knit a blanket, all rejected. "We have it handled, Clara," she'd say, her voice firm, leaving no room for discussion. Each dismissal, each snub, reinforced her intention to keep me at arm's length, pushing me further away. And with each new slight, the secret I had carried for years felt heavier, deeper. It was a truth I had buried, a truth about Eleanor that I had vowed never to unearth. But now, standing here, banished from my grandchild's birth, that vow felt fragile, almost broken. My mind drifted back 17 years. I had been volunteering at a local women's shelter when I met Martha Green. Martha was barely in her 20s, her eyes hollowed by addiction and despair, but beneath it all was a deep, aching sadness for a past she couldn't outrun. She was trying to get clean, trying to rebuild her life, and in her vulnerability, she shared her deepest regret, giving up her 3-year-old daughter for adoption years prior. Martha spoke of her little girl, Eleanor, with a heartbreaking mix of love and regret. She described her daughter's bright, curious eyes, her infectious giggle, and a very specific birthmark, a small, strawberry-shaped mark just behind her left ear. Martha cried as she recounted how addiction and mental health struggles had made her feel incapable of raising her child. She hoped her daughter was with a loving family, somewhere safe and happy. I listened, my heart heavy, and offered what comfort I could. Martha eventually found some peace but tragically passed away a few years later, never having reunited with her daughter. Then, 5 years ago, Leo introduced me to Eleanor Hayes. The name alone had sent a shiver down my spine. I tried to dismiss it as a coincidence, but as I got to know her, the unsettling details began to surface. That sharp, intelligent mind, her fierce independence. Then, one day, she tied her hair back, and there it was, the small, strawberry-shaped birthmark, hidden just behind her left ear. It was impossible, I thought, an impossible coincidence, but my gut screamed otherwise. Leo's wife, Eleanor Hayes, was Martha Green's biological daughter. The realization had been a seismic shock. I grappled with it for weeks, the weight of the knowledge immense, but Martha was gone, and from all accounts, Eleanor had been adopted into a loving, stable family. What good would it do to reveal such a painful truth? It would only shatter Eleanor's carefully constructed world, cause immense pain, and disrupt the lives of her adoptive parents. I decided then, with a heavy heart, to keep the secret buried. It wasn't my story to tell, and I believed revealing it would only cause more harm than good. Until now, the delivery room door finally opened again, and Leo emerged, looking exhausted but beaming. "It's a girl, Mom!" he exclaimed, rushing over to hug me. "Daisy. Daisy Clara Hayes." My name, woven into hers. A tiny spark of joy pierced through the gloom. "Can I see her? And Eleanor?" I asked, my voice hopeful. Leo's face fell. "Eleanor's still pretty upset, Mom," she said. "Maybe tomorrow. She needs time." The spark died. Even after giving birth, Eleanor wouldn't allow me in. The injustice was a bitter taste in my mouth. Just then, a kind nurse, noticing my crestfallen expression, approached me. "Grandma," she said softly. "They've taken the baby to the nursery for a quick check. You can usually see them through the window there." I nodded, grateful, and followed her instructions. There, in the sterile warmth of the nursery, nestled in a small bassinet, was Daisy, my granddaughter. She was tiny, perfect, wrapped in a pink blanket, her little fists curled, her eyes tightly shut. A wave of overwhelming love washed over me, fierce and protective. Through the glass, I whispered a vow, a promise born of years of hurt and the painful weight of a secret. "I have so much to tell you someday, Daisy," I murmured, my voice thick with emotion, "including a story your mother desperately needs to hear." The drive home from the hospital felt longer than usual, the quiet hum of my old sedan doing little to fill the emptiness that pressed in on me. My house, typically a sanctuary, now seemed vast and silent, amplifying the ache in my chest. I thought of Leo, my son, and how I had poured every ounce of my being into raising him after his father's sudden death when Leo was just 5. Every choice I made, every sacrifice, was for him. He was my world, my reason for being. We had faced so much together, just the two of us, forging a bond I believed was unbreakable. To see him stand by silently, as Eleanor banished me, felt like a betrayal of that history, though I knew his heart was caught in a difficult place. I remembered the day he first spoke of Eleanor, his voice alight with an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "She's amazing, Mom," he had gushed. "I've never met anyone like her." He painted a picture of a brilliant, independent woman, unlike anyone I had ever known. His infatuation was complete, a whirlwind that swept him off his feet. I had been genuinely happy for him, thrilled to see him so utterly smitten, hoping this was the woman who would finally bring him lasting joy. Eleanor's first visit to my modest home was etched into my memory. I had cleaned and cooked, hoping to impress her with a warm, welcoming atmosphere. My house wasn't grand, but it was filled with memories, photographs, and comfortable, well-loved furniture. Eleanor arrived, impeccably dressed, her eyes scanning everything with a distant politeness that felt more like scrutiny. She complimented my efforts, of course, but her words felt hollow, a practiced politeness. There was a subtle aloofness, a quiet judgment that permeated the air, making me feel like an exhibit rather than a hostess. She didn't offer to help, didn't delve into conversation beyond surface-level remarks. She simply observed, her beautiful face betraying nothing, yet conveying everything. Leo had, in the early days, tried to explain some of Eleanor's distant nature. He told me she was very private about her past, citing unresolved feelings about being given up. He mentioned it briefly, in hushed tones, almost as a warning. He said she didn't like talking about her adoption, that it was a sensitive topic. This explanation, given with genuine concern for Eleanor, had been the primary reason I had kept Martha Green's secret to myself. I believed I was protecting Eleanor, honoring her unspoken pain, and following Leo's implicit request to respect her boundaries. Back home, in the quiet of my study, the silence was heavy. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hall. My gaze fell upon the small antique writing desk where I kept important documents. With a sigh, I opened the bottom drawer and retrieved a worn manila envelope. Inside were the tangible remnants of Martha Green, a fragile, handwritten letter, and a faded photograph. The photo, taken years ago, showed a young, hopeful Martha holding a smiling 3-year-old girl. The little girl had bright, curious eyes and a shy smile, and behind her left ear, a faint, strawberry-shaped birthmark. It was Eleanor. Undeniably. I carefully unfolded Martha's dying letter, the paper soft with age. Her shaky handwriting filled the page. A plea from beyond the grave. "Please tell Eleanor I never stopped loving her," I read, the words a raw whisper in my mind. "Tell her I was sick in ways she couldn't understand. Tell her it wasn't her fault. I hope she's happy, Clara. Please." My eyes welled up, a familiar ache returning. Martha's desperation, her profound remorse, and her enduring love for her child, despite her own destructive struggles, resonated deeply. This letter, this raw confession, had been a constant presence in my life, a heavy burden I felt obligated to bear. I had often considered telling Eleanor. There were so many moments where the truth felt like it was bubbling up, desperate to escape. But then Leo's words would echo in my mind. Unresolved feelings, sensitive topic. The fear of inflicting more pain, of shattering the peace she had found with her adoptive family, always held me back. I was caught between Martha's dying wish and the protection of the woman my son loved. Even if that woman treated me with a calculated coolness. My phone vibrated, startling me. It was Leo. "Mom, Daisy's beautiful. Absolutely perfect." His voice was filled with a joy that brought a fresh wave of tears to my eyes, and Eleanor decided on her full name. Mom. Daisy Marie Henderson. I froze. "Marie?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Marie was my middle name, a name I hadn't expected to hear associated with Eleanor in any positive way. It was a surprising gesture, completely out of character. A tiny, irrational flicker of hope sparked within me. Leo continued, his voice softer now. "Look, Mom. About earlier. Eleanor was just, birth is intense. She didn't mean anything by it." "It's all right, Leo," I interrupted, my tone weary. I didn't want to discuss Eleanor's behavior right now. I truly understood the intensity of childbirth, the raw emotions it could unearth, but it didn't fully excuse the deliberate cruelty. Still, I let it go. "How is Eleanor doing?" "She's resting now," he said. "The nurses said she did great." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet, pondering Eleanor's unexpected choice of Marie. Was it a genuine olive branch, a sign that motherhood was softening her, opening her heart, perhaps even towards me? Or was it a more calculated move, a superficial gesture designed to please Leo, to keep him happy, while still maintaining her impenetrable distance from me? Was it just another way to do things differently, to claim a small piece of me on her own terms, without actually inviting me closer? The thought was unsettling. The gesture felt both warm and cold, a paradox that was typical of Eleanor. That night, my sleep was restless, plagued by dreams. I saw Martha, her eyes pleading, her hand outstretched. Then Eleanor appeared, her face a mask of polite indifference, the birthmark a stark crimson against her skin. And finally, Daisy, a tiny, innocent bundle, floating between them, unreachable. I was in the dream, desperately trying to bridge the gap, to connect these three women. But invisible walls kept pushing them apart. It was a struggle, a yearning for connection that felt impossible to achieve. Before dawn, I awoke with a new sense of resolve. The dream, the letter, Daisy's innocent face, all converged into a single purpose. I would try once more to connect with Eleanor, patiently and gently. For Daisy's sake, I had to. And as for Martha's story, the truth I carried, I would wait. I would hold on to it. A potent, unspoken truth. Until the time was right. I didn't know when that would be, or what it would take, but I knew, deep in my bones, that Daisy's mother desperately needed to hear it someday. 3 weeks had passed since Daisy's birth, and I was still waiting. Waiting for an invitation that never came. I'd sent over a constant stream of gifts, tiny handmade booties, a soft cashmere blanket, a mobile for the crib. Each met with a terse, "Thank you, Clara," delivered via Leo. I'd cooked meals, hearty casseroles and comforting soups, leaving them on their doorstep, hoping the act of care would soften Eleanor's resolve. But all I received were polite excuses from Leo. "Eleanor's still adjusting." "Mom," he'd say, "she's really tired." Or, "She's just not up for visitors yet." Each excuse felt like another brick in the wall Eleanor had built between us. Then, one evening, as dusk settled and I was tidying up after dinner, the doorbell rang, startling me. I opened it to find Leo, his usually cheerful face drawn and pale, his eyes rimmed with red. He looked utterly distraught, exhausted, like a man at the end of his rope. My heart immediately went out to him. This wasn't just tired, this was broken. Without a word, I pulled him into a hug, feeling his body sag against mine. "Come in, my dear," I whispered, leading him to the living room. "Sit down." "What's wrong?" He sank onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. "It's Eleanor, Mom," he choked out, his voice hoarse. She's not herself. She's not bonding with Daisy. She's so detached. She barely holds her." He paused, taking a shaky breath. "She has nightmares, Mom." Wakes up screaming. My concern deepened. This was more than just new parent jitters. "What kind of nightmares, Leo?" I asked gently. "She doesn't remember," she says. "But she wakes up terrified." He looked up, his eyes pleading. "Today, I found her crying on the bathroom floor. Just sobbing. She kept saying she was a horrible mother, that she was going to ruin Daisy's life, just like—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "Like what, Leo?" I prompted softly. "She didn't finish," he said, rubbing his temples. "Just that Daisy would be better off without her." "Leo, it sounds like she might be experiencing postpartum depression," I suggested, the words tasting clinical even as my heart ached for Eleanor. "It's common, and there's help available." He nodded, defeated. "I've tried, Mom. I've begged her to see a doctor. But she refuses. She says medication is a crutch. That she needs to fix this herself. She gets angry, says I don't understand." My mind immediately jumped to Martha Green. Martha, with her own battles against mental illness, her own desperate cries of not being a good mother. Could this be more than just postpartum depression? Could there be a genetic predisposition at play? A painful echo of Martha's struggles manifesting in Eleanor? Or was it the trauma of her adoption, resurfacing now that she herself was a mother, creating a deep-seated fear of repeating a past she didn't even consciously remember? The pieces of the puzzle, so long dormant, were beginning to shift, to connect in a way that was both horrifying and illuminating. Leo continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She told me, she actually said, maybe Daisy would be better off without her, that she wasn't meant to be a mother." His words hung in the air, heavy with despair. It was almost exactly what Martha had said, all those years ago. The similarities were chilling. I took his hand. Leo, I can help, I said, my voice firm. I know Eleanor dislikes me, but she needs someone. Maybe, precisely because she doesn't have to pretend with me, she might accept my help. I can cook, clean, take care of Daisy for a few hours. Give her a break. Leo looked at me, a glimmer of desperate hope in his eyes. You think she would let you? We have to try, I insisted. For Daisy. And for Eleanor. He nodded slowly, a deep sigh escaping him. Okay, Mom. Thank you. I don't know what else to do. He stood up, looking slightly less burdened, but still deeply troubled. As he headed for the door, I remembered something. Leo, I called out. He paused. Why did Eleanor choose Marie for Daisy's middle name? My middle name? He turned, a faint, sad smile on his face. She said you've always been stable, Mom. Present. She said that's a rare quality in her experience. She wants Daisy to have some of that. His words hit me like a physical blow. Stable, present, rare in her experience. It confirmed my darkest suspicions. Eleanor's struggles were far deeper than I had imagined. It wasn't just superficial dislike. It was a profound, unspoken wound, a yearning for something she hadn't found in her own past. The pieces of the puzzle were indeed slowly coming together, revealing a picture far more complex and tragic than I had ever fully grasped. Later, after Leo had left, I returned to my study and pulled out Martha's letter again. My eyes fell on a passage I hadn't fully appreciated before. A line about Martha's fear that her struggles would somehow be passed down, a prediction that her daughter might face similar emotional challenges when she became a mother herself. Martha had written about her wish for someone to guide Eleanor, to be the steady presence she couldn't be. The words seemed to jump off the page, a direct message from the past, resonating with Eleanor's current crisis. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I called Brenda, my oldest and wisest friend, a woman who had seen me through every joy and sorrow. I explained the situation, omitting, of course, the secret of Eleanor's parentage. Brenda listened patiently, then offered a quiet wisdom that always grounded me. Clara, she said, her voice soft but firm. Sometimes the people who push us away the hardest are the ones who need us most. They just don't know how to ask. But she makes it so hard, Brenda, I confessed, my voice cracking. I know, honey, Brenda replied. But you show up anyway. Don't judge, don't push, just be there. That's all you can do. And sometimes, that's everything. Her words were a balm to my weary soul. I had to show up. For Daisy, for Leo, and, perhaps most importantly, for Eleanor, even if she didn't know how to ask for it. The next morning, I rose before dawn, a sense of quiet determination settling over me. Brenda's words echoed in my mind. Show up anyway. Don't judge. Just be there. I moved through my kitchen with purpose, baking a batch of my famous blueberry muffins, the sweet aroma filling the air. I prepared a thermos of hearty chicken soup, known for its comforting properties, and brewed a pot of soothing chamomile tea. For Daisy, I added a soft, plush stuffed elephant to the basket, a small token of grandmotherly love. My mission was simple. Offer help, offer comfort, without expectation or judgment. The drive to Eleanor and Leo's house was short, but each mile felt heavy with anticipation. As I pulled into their driveway, I heard it. Daisy's desperate, piercing cries, cutting through the morning stillness. They were the cries of a baby in true distress, a sound that pierced my heart and spurred me forward. The intensity of her wails confirmed my worst fears. Eleanor was in serious trouble. I approached the front door, the basket clutched in my hand, my knuckles poised to knock. But then I noticed it was slightly ajar. Hesitantly, I pushed it open further. Eleanor? Leo? I called out, my voice soft. No answer. The house was quiet save for Daisy's cries, which seemed to grow louder with each step I took inside. The scene that greeted me was stark. The once immaculate living room was now a testament to neglect. Piled dishes with dried food crumbs overflowed the sink, a pungent smell lingering in the air. Laundry baskets sat everywhere, spilling out clothes onto the floor. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that pierced through the drawn blinds, highlighting the general disarray. The air was heavy, musty, and still. It was a complete contrast to the pristine, ordered home Eleanor usually maintained. This was not just postpartum exhaustion. This was a complete unraveling. I followed the sound of Daisy's cries down the hall, past the closed bedroom door, and into the nursery. There, in her crib, Daisy was a tiny, red-faced bundle of misery, her little body trembling with the force of her wails. My heart twisted. Then I saw Eleanor. She was sitting on the floor beside the crib, her back against the wall, her knees drawn up to her chest. Her eyes were wide, vacant, staring blankly at the wall opposite, unseeing. Her hair was a tangled mess, her clothes disheveled. She didn't move. Didn't even seem to register my presence. It was as if she were a statue, a ghost in her own home. My voice was gentle, a quiet ripple in the cacophony of Daisy's cries. "Eleanor," I said softly, my hand reaching out, not quite touching her. "I'm just going to pick up Daisy." Eleanor didn't stir, didn't speak. Her eyes remained fixed, unblinking. It was a terrifying blankness, a complete absence of the sharp, dismissive woman I knew. It was as if her spirit had simply fled, leaving an empty shell behind. I leaned over the crib, carefully lifting my granddaughter into my arms. Daisy was hot and damp, her little face contorted in distress. I pulled her close, murmuring soft words, rocking her gently. There, my sweet Daisy," I whispered, her tiny body trembling against mine. "Grandma's here." "It's all right." Slowly, miraculously, the high-pitched wails began to subside, replaced by soft whimpers, then quiet sniffles. Her small hand instinctively curled around my finger, holding on tight. With Daisy finally calm, I turned my attention back to Eleanor. "Where's Leo?" I asked, keeping my voice low and soothing. It took a moment, but then a whisper, barely audible, escaped Eleanor's lips. "Meeting." Her voice was raspy, dry. It was the first acknowledgement she had made of my presence, a small crack in her impenetrable wall. "When was the last time you slept, Eleanor?" I asked, my voice still gentle, devoid of judgment. She shrugged, a small, weary movement. Her gaze finally shifted, unfocusing on me, her eyes hollow, haunted. "I'm failing at this," she whispered, her voice cracking, "just like I fail at everything that matters." In that moment, seeing the profound despair in her eyes, the utter defeat that mirrored Martha's own ravaged face so many years ago, I knew the secret, the truth about her past, could not stay hidden much longer. It wasn't just postpartum depression. It was a deeper, more primal pain. A generational echo that resonated with Martha's own tragic words. This wasn't just about Eleanor's present. It was about her past, haunting her, suffocating her. I carefully shifted Daisy in my arms, ensuring her head was supported, her tiny hand still clutching my finger. With my free hand, I pulled out my phone. I had to call Leo, but as I dialed, I made a silent, fierce promise to both Eleanor and the tiny, sleeping baby in my arms. I would not let history repeat itself. Not this time. Martha's pain had consumed her, and Eleanor's adoption trauma had left its mark. But Daisy, my sweet Daisy, deserved a mother who was whole. A family free from the shadow of unspoken truths. And if that meant breaking open a secret I had guarded for so long, then so be it. This story isn't just about family drama. It's about the deep scars we carry and the incredible strength it takes to heal. Stay with me to find out how secrets unravel, and how even the most broken bonds can begin to mend. Like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss a single part of this journey. Leo, shocked and terrified by Eleanor's state, immediately took emergency family leave from his demanding job. It was a testament to his love for Eleanor, a clear sign that despite everything, he was committed to her and their family. I moved into their guest room, transforming it into my temporary sanctuary. My days became a rhythm of caring for Daisy, feeding, changing, rocking her to sleep, while Leo focused all his energy on convincing Eleanor to see a doctor. It was a battle, but one he eventually won, driven by the profound fear of losing her to the darkness. The diagnosis was severe: postpartum depression, possibly with psychotic features. The doctors were clear. Eleanor needed medication, intensive therapy, and constant, unwavering support. It was a long road ahead, but at least now we had a name for the enemy, a plan of attack. Eleanor, in her lucid moments, seemed overwhelmed, but quietly agreed to the treatment. It was a fragile beginning. Eleanor's adoptive parents, Mr. and Mrs. Reynolds, made a visit. They were kind, polite people, clearly concerned for Eleanor. They brought flowers and a baby gift, but their discomfort was palpable. They offered to help, but always from a distance, avoiding Eleanor's darkened bedroom, never quite stepping into the emotional chaos that enveloped the house. They would chat with Leo and me in the living room, their voices hushed, their expressions worried, but they seemed ill-equipped to handle the raw, intense emotions swirling around their daughter. Leo later explained, his voice laced with a familiar resignation, that the Reynolds were not comfortable with emotional stuff. He described their home as stable, orderly, but emotionally reserved. They provided for Eleanor, gave her a good education, and a comfortable life, but profound emotional intimacy seemed to be beyond them. This shed a harsh light on Eleanor's unaddressed trauma of abandonment. She had been adopted into a loving home, yes, but one that perhaps inadvertently fostered her emotional guardedness, leaving the deepest wounds of her past untouched, unhealed. It made her coldness toward me, and even her current detachment from Daisy, tragically understandable. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, Eleanor's medication began to take effect. The blankness in her eyes started to recede, replaced by a flicker of awareness. She began to emerge from her bedroom more often, sometimes just sitting in the living room, quiet and withdrawn. There were moments when I would be with Daisy, singing soft lullabies, gently rocking her, and I would catch Eleanor watching us. Her hostility, that sharp, dismissive edge she usually carried, was gone, replaced by a wistful curiosity, a yearning I hadn't seen before. One quiet afternoon, as I was singing an old lullaby to Daisy, a melody my own mother had sung to me, Eleanor spoke, her voice thin but clear. "That's a pretty song," she said. "What is it?" "Just an old folk song," I replied, my heart giving a hopeful lurch. My mother sang it to me. Eleanor was silent for a moment, then she added, her voice almost a whisper. "No one sang to me when I was little." The words hung in the air, heavy with a silent accusation. A deep-seated loneliness. I looked at her, my heart aching. "I can teach it to you," I offered gently. "For Daisy. She loves it." Eleanor flinched, her body tensing. "No," she said, her voice rising in a panicked tone. "I can't do what you do with her. She always cries when I hold her. I don't know why. I must be doing something wrong." Her eyes started to well up, a familiar despair creeping back in. "She senses your anxiety, Eleanor," I explained softly, keeping my voice calm and reassuring. "Babies are like sponges. They pick up on our feelings. It's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you're scared." She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. "I am," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. I look at her, and all I can think is that I'm going to damage her somehow, that I'm not meant for this. The words were an echo, a painful reminder of Martha's own despair. I saw my opening, a fragile window into her pain. "Eleanor," I began, my voice even softer. "Why have you always kept me at such a distance? Even before all this?" She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "You had this perfect relationship with Jacob," she started, referring to Leo's father. "This intact family history, family photos everywhere, stories about your childhood, your parents. It was all so complete. I've never had that." Her voice was raw, revealing a vulnerability I had never witnessed before. Then, she voiced her deepest, most profound fear, the one that had festered within her for decades. "You don't know what it's like to wonder why your own mother didn't want you." The words were a bitter confession, a lifetime of unspoken hurt bubbling to the surface. This was it. The moment I had anticipated, the raw opening I had waited for. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding. What if she did want you, Eleanor? I asked, my gaze steady, gentle, but unwavering. What if giving you up was the hardest thing she ever did? What if she loved you more than anything, but was too sick, too broken to be the mother you deserved? Eleanor's eyes, which had been full of tears, suddenly narrowed, a flicker of something new. Suspicion, fear, curiosity, flashing within them. What are you talking about? She demanded, her voice sharp again, the old Eleanor peeking through the cracks of her pain. But before I could elaborate, before I could begin to unravel the carefully guarded secret, she put her hands to her head. I need to lie down. My head hurts. And with that, she pushed herself up, stumbled out of the room, and retreated to the solace of her dark bedroom. She was gone, but the seed had been planted. I knew it. A tiny crack in her wall, a sliver of light in her darkness. It was enough. For now. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor's condition continued to improve steadily. The medication, combined with therapy, chipped away at the dark cloud that had enveloped her. She started spending more time out of her room, even venturing into the kitchen to make herself a cup of tea. Most significantly, she began to engage with Daisy. At first, it was hesitant, brief moments. But gradually, she gained confidence. She would sit beside me, quietly observing my techniques, how I held Daisy, how I changed her, the gentle way I spoke to her. Slowly, carefully, she started to try these things herself, her movements still a little stiff, but her intent clear. One sunny morning, as I was patiently teaching her the art of swaddling, a task she found particularly frustrating, Eleanor surprised me. "How did you learn all this, Clara?" she asked, her voice softer than usual, lacking its typical edge. "Was your mother like you?" I smiled. "My mother taught me a lot, yes. And a lot of it you just learn along the way. Every baby is different." She paused, fumbling with the blanket. "My adoptive parents," she began, her gaze fixed on Daisy. "They were good people. They gave me everything. Everything except answers." Her voice dropped to a near whisper. "About her. My birth mother." My breath hitched. This was it. The conversation I had both dreaded and yearned for. I kept my hand steady, helping her with the swaddle, letting her lead. Eleanor continued, her voice heavy with a long-held pain. "I have these dreams, Clara. They've been coming back for years, but they got so much worse after Daisy was born." She looked up, her eyes wide and vulnerable. "My birth mother leaving me, just walking away. And sometimes," she confessed, her voice barely audible, "sometimes in the dream, it's me. I'm walking away from Daisy." A tear traced a path down her cheek. "Dreams often help us process our fears, Eleanor," I said, keeping my tone gentle and reassuring. "It sounds like you're afraid of repeating a pattern you don't understand, a pattern that isn't even truly yours, but feels like it." She looked at me, her eyes brimming. "Is it genetic, Clara? Whatever made her leave me? Is it inside me, too?" The question was raw, laced with terror. It was the same fear that had consumed Martha, a generational echo that resonated with agonizing clarity. I finished the swaddle, then gently placed Daisy into Eleanor's arms. Daisy, now calm and quiet, gazed up at her mother with wide, innocent eyes. "Look at her, Eleanor," I urged, my voice firm but kind. "You're here. You're fighting to be present. That already makes you different. That already makes you a good mother." Eleanor, still tearful, looked down at Daisy, her expression a mix of fear and yearning. Tentatively, awkwardly, she began to sing the lullaby I had taught her, the one she had heard me sing to Daisy so many times. Her voice was hesitant, a little off-key, but the melody was there. And to both our surprise, Daisy, who had started to fuss slightly, quieted. Her tiny eyes seemed to lock onto Eleanor's, a moment of profound, unspoken connection passing between mother and daughter. "See?" I whispered, my own eyes welling up with emotion. "That connection is there, Eleanor. It just needs nurturing. It just needs you to believe in it." Eleanor nodded, a small, fragile smile touching her lips. "I want to be a good mother, Clara," she said, her voice filled with a desperate earnestness. "More than anything." Later that afternoon, as I was washing dishes in the kitchen, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, her expression serious. She had clearly been thinking about our earlier conversation. "You said something strange earlier," she began, her voice low, almost an accusation. "About her wanting me. About giving me up being the hardest thing she ever did." "How would you know anything about that?" Her eyes narrowed, the old suspicion returning, sharper this time. I paused, carefully drying my hands. "I've known many women in difficult situations, Eleanor," I replied, trying to deflect, to buy myself a moment. Women who were forced to make impossible choices, but Eleanor wasn't buying it. She stepped further into the kitchen, her gaze unwavering. "No," she insisted, her voice gaining strength. "You know something, don't you? Something about me. About my birth mother." Her intuition, sharp and keen, was piercing through my carefully constructed defenses. She was practically demanding the truth. Just as I was steeling myself to begin, to finally unravel the intricate tapestry of lies and secrets I had woven, Daisy's cries erupted from the nursery. The sound was a loud, undeniable interruption, pulling us both back to the present moment, to the urgent needs of the fragile life upstairs. I looked at Eleanor, then back towards the nursery. "She needs you," I said, my voice gentle. "Go to her. The rest can wait." Eleanor hesitated for a moment, then, with a determined nod, she turned and hurried towards Daisy's cries. As I listened to her footsteps recede, I knew the time was coming. The secret, so carefully guarded for so long, was beginning to unravel. The threads were loose, and soon, very soon, Eleanor would be ready to pull on them, to reveal the whole, painful history. 2 more weeks passed, and with each day, Eleanor grew stronger. The medication and therapy continued to work their magic, and she was more engaged, more present, and more confident with Daisy. I began to reduce my overnight stays, transitioning to daily visits, giving them space to build their own rhythm as a family. Yet, the unspoken truth still hung between Eleanor and me, a fragile thread waiting to be pulled. One rainy afternoon, I arrived at their house just as Leo was rushing out the door. His face was etched with urgency. "Emergency at work, Mom," he said quickly. "I have to go. Can you stay with Eleanor and Daisy?" I nodded, my heart sinking slightly as I watched him disappear into the downpour. This was it. The moment had chosen itself. I stepped inside, the house feeling strangely quiet after Leo's hurried departure. I found Eleanor in the living room, sitting on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her gaze was fixed on me, intense and unwavering. There was a letter in her hand. A letter I recognized with a jolt of dread and understanding. "How long have you known Clara?" she asked, her voice quiet, but laced with an undeniable tremor of anger and hurt. My stomach clenched. She had found it. The letter I had written to Leo 3 years ago, when I had briefly considered revealing the truth. A confession of knowing Eleanor's birth mother, Martha Green. It was a letter I had never sent, but had foolishly left in a drawer in my study, a drawer I assumed was private. I sat down opposite her, taking a deep breath. There was no going back now. "I met your birth mother, Martha Green, 17 years ago," I began, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside me. "It was at a recovery support group I volunteered for. Martha was struggling with addiction, and later, she was diagnosed with cancer." Eleanor's eyes widened, a kaleidoscope of emotions, shock, betrayal, dawning comprehension, flickering across her face. "She told me about you, Eleanor," I continued, choosing my words carefully. "She expressed so much regret about giving you up. She loved you deeply, even named you after her own grandmother, hoping you'd carry on a part of her family she couldn't protect." Eleanor listened, her face pale. Why? She whispered, the single word a raw plea. Why did she give me up? Martha struggled with severe, untreated bipolar disorder, I explained, the words feeling heavy on my tongue, and undiagnosed postpartum depression after you were born. The addiction was her way of coping with the unbearable pain and confusion. She felt incapable, Clara, truly incapable of being the mother you deserved. She feared she would damage you. I emphasized a crucial detail. She kept you for 3 years, Eleanor. She arranged a voluntary surrender, not abandonment. It was a final act of love, ensuring you would have a stable, loving home she believed she couldn't provide. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face, a mix of grief and rage. And you kept this from me, she accused, her voice rising. For 5 years you knew. For 17 years you knew a piece of my history, my identity, and you kept it from me. I was wrong, Eleanor, I admitted, my own voice thick with emotion. I truly believed I was protecting you. Leo told me you were sensitive about your adoption, that your adoptive parents were uncomfortable with emotional issues. I made the mistake of deciding what you should know, instead of trusting you with your own truth. The admission felt both humbling and liberating. Martha died 15 years ago, I added softly, the words hanging in the air. But she wrote you a letter. A long one. I've kept it safe for you, along with some photos of her, and of you as a baby. Eleanor stared at me, her anger still burning, but now mixed with a profound sadness. Why now? She challenged, her voice trembling. Why did you wait until I was like this, until I felt like I was damaged goods just like her? Because you're not damaged goods. Eleanor, I countered firmly, meeting her gaze. And because you have something Martha never had. You have knowledge and support. You're getting treatment. You have a loving partner. You have people who understand and want to help. You have the chance to break the cycle she couldn't. Just then, Daisy's cries echoed from upstairs. Eleanor flinched, the sound pulling her back to the present. I reached into my bag and pulled out Martha's old, worn manila envelope. Here, I said, offering it to her. When you're ready, read it when you feel strong enough. Eleanor took the envelope, her fingers tracing the faded edges. Then she stood and hurried upstairs to her daughter. The secret had been unveiled, and now, the healing could begin. 3 weeks later, the day was bright and clear. Eleanor, composed and calm, arrived at my house, Daisy nestled in her arms, Leo by her side. She looked different, lighter, almost radiant. Her eyes, though still holding a trace of past pain, now also held a quiet strength. I've read Martha's letter, she stated, her voice even, many times. She paused, a faint, sad smile playing on her lips. You know, her handwriting is so much like mine, her turns of phrase, even her wit. I never knew I possessed that. That genetic connection. She looked at me, then at Leo, then down at Daisy. I've been angry, she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. Angry at Martha for leaving. Angry at the Reynolds for not telling me. Angry at you, Clara, for keeping it from me. And angry at myself for letting it consume me. She took a deep breath. But the letter, it helped me understand. Her sacrifice. Her pain. It wasn't about me not being wanted. It was about her wanting me to have a life she couldn't give. I've scheduled an appointment with a genetic counselor, she announced, a hint of determination in her voice. And I've started writing letters to Daisy. To tell her everything, to break the cycle of secrets. Then, Eleanor did something that brought tears to my eyes. She gently held Daisy out to me. Here, she said, her voice soft. As I took Daisy into my arms, the baby looked up at me, her eyes bright and curious, and in that moment, I saw Martha Green looking back at me, a profound, almost spiritual connection spanning generations. I know I still have a long way to go, Eleanor admitted, looking at Leo. But I'm going to show up. For Daisy. For you. For myself. She met my gaze. Families are messy, aren't they? She said, echoing my own words from so long ago. Leo stepped forward, putting an arm around Eleanor. "How about we start a new tradition?" he suggested, a hopeful smile on his face. "Sunday dinners at Mom's?" Eleanor looked at me, her eyes softening. "I'm so sorry, Clara," she said, her voice genuine. "I was so afraid of your stability, of what your intact family represented. I pushed you away because I was so broken. But now I see you're exactly the influence Daisy needs. The influence I needed." Then, she stepped forward and embraced me. It was a brief hug, but it was significant, a silent apology, a promise of a new beginning. "Thank you," she whispered into my ear. "Thank you for keeping Martha's story. Thank you for giving me back a piece of myself." As I held Daisy, cradling her close, surrounded by my son and a daughter-in-law who was finally beginning to heal, I reflected on our shared story. It was a fragile new beginning, born from pain and secrets, but now rooted in understanding and love. 3 generations of women, linked not just by DNA, but by a powerful, enduring journey towards truth, understanding, and reconciliation.